Welcome to the deep dive. In a world that often feels like it's just spinning faster and faster, global events unfolding so quickly, it's really easy to feel swamped by it all. Our mission here is to try and cut through some of that noise, get straight to the crucial bits, the important knowledge, so you get a clear understanding without the overwhelm. Today, we're diving into something pretty major, something that's been all over the headlines, the immediate aftermath of the U.S. strike on Iran. It's obviously complex, evolving really fast, and we know keeping track of all the pieces can be tough.
That's absolutely right. And our goal today is to sort of synthesize a stack of the latest, most critical sources we've got. Give you a clear picture, concise, of what's actually unfolded since that attack. We'll look at the global reactions, what to watch next, basically cut through the noise so you can grasp the really important insights and, well, feel properly informed.
Exactly. It's about getting those key insights, the so what behind it all. Okay, so with that said, let's unpack this. Let's start right at the beginning, set the scene. This U.S. action, Operation Midnight Hammer, it launched June 21st, 2025. Can you walk us through the specifics? What actually happened?
Sure. So the U.S. went after three specific Iranian nuclear sites, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. And what's really key here is how they did it. They used bunker buster bombs, precision missiles. These aren't just regular munitions. They're designed to hit hardened, deep underground facilities. It signals a pretty clear intent to neutralize core nuclear capabilities, not just scratch the surface. Afterwards, President Trump called it a spectacular military success, and he issued a very direct warning to Iran against retaliation.
Right, and it sounds like the U.S. wasn't entirely alone in this initial phase. Was there coordination?
Yes, there was. Israel acted pretty much immediately after the U.S. strikes, and it was in coordination. Their targets were different, though. Iranian government sites in Tehran, things like Evin Prison, some key missile infrastructure. What's really fascinating, I suppose, is just how quick and coordinated it all was. Those initial strikes, and then the very clear, very assertive U.S. messaging right after, setting a firm line.
Okay, so those strikes happen. The world is watching, and Iran. Well, they didn't wait long, did they? What was their direct response?
No, they didn't. They retaliated quickly with missile and drone attacks. These were aimed specifically at Israeli cities, and unfortunately, these did result in wounded civilians. This kind of swift, direct response, it wasn't just tit for tat. It really signaled Iran's low tolerance for direct attacks on its soil and its readiness to escalate. That gives you some insight into their strategic thinking.
And almost right away, we saw this major economic threat surface, too, the Strait of Hormuz.
A huge one, yes. Iran threatened to close the strait. If you look at the bigger picture, this is a massive economic lever. It's one of the world's absolute critical choke points for oil. Something like, nearly a fifth of the world's daily oil supply, about 21 million barrels a day goes through that narrow passage.
21 miles wide, I think.
That's it. So closing it, that's a huge risk for global oil supply disruptions. It hits everything. Gas prices, cost of goods, you name it.
What's really striking, too, is how fast it spread beyond just the U.S., Israel, and Iran.
Yeah.
How did the ripples pull in other regional actors so quickly?
Well, that's the thing. The moment the U.S. strikes landed, the Iran-aligned Houthis down in Yemen, they immediately called it a declaration of war. And they didn't just talk. They started launching their own missiles, aiming towards Israeli targets.
So it immediately widened the conflict zone.
Exactly. It just showed how interconnected that whole network of alliances and proxies really is in the region. It's not just state versus state. And this escalation, understandably, set off alarm bells globally. You had the UN, the EU, NATO, Russia, China, Turkey, Pakistan, all the major players basically calling for restraint, for diplomacy, urging everyone to de-escalate before it spiraled completely out of control.
And the human cost was immediate, too. We saw things like, I think, over 18 Irish nationals needing evacuation from both Iran and Israel.
So,
Safety concerns.
yeah.
It really brings home the personal impact of these big geopolitical events, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And then on a larger scale, the U.S. started bolstering its own security posture. They issued a global travel warning, ramped up domestic security, law enforcement preparedness, clearly anticipating potential blowback.
So, okay, beyond security, what about the economy? We saw fallout there pretty fast, right?
Oh, yes. Commercial shipping, particularly oil tankers, they started rerouting almost immediately, trying to avoid the Strait of Hormuz, that potential threat, and the oil price spikes we saw. It wasn't just about actual supply being cut off yet. It highlights the psychological fragility of global markets when it comes to this kind of geopolitical risk. Just the anticipation of disruption can hit economic stability hard, sometimes more than the actual physical damage initially. So as we look forward now, this immediate aftermath sort of sets a new stage. We've kind of identified three critical things that are really going to shape what happens next, whether this spirals or maybe de-escalates. It's about Iran's next move, the goals of the big international players, and, well, figuring out the actual truth on the ground, which can be tricky.
That makes sense. Let's dig into that first one, Iran's response. They vowed a proportionate response.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean in practice, and what are the dangers there?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Proportionate is deliberately vague. It lets them maintain deterrence, maybe, without immediately jumping into all-out war. A lot of analysts think this might mean more limited actions, maybe military, maybe cyber attacks, hitting infrastructure perhaps, things that are maybe deniable, rather than a massive direct confrontation.
Plausible deniability.
Exactly. But the risk, of course, is huge. What Iran sees as proportionate, the other side might see as a major escalation. And then you're caught in that dangerous cycle.
Right. And speaking of other actors, it feels like this is prime territory for regional proxy flare-ups, indirect conflict through allied groups. Should we expect more of that?
Oh, absolutely. We should definitely anticipate seeing more of these proxy flare-ups, more activity from Iran-backed militias, from the Houthi groups right across the Middle East.
Yeah.
It's not always direct state-on-state fighting. These groups are key for projecting power, creating instability, applying pressure, often without direct, clear attribution. Which then brings up this really important question. What is the ultimate U.S. goal here? It feels a bit unclear. We saw President Trump hint at regime change if Iran retaliates further, but then almost in the same breath saying diplomacy might still be on the table.
That mixed messaging, yeah.
It creates a lot of uncertainty, doesn't it, about
Right.
the long-term strategy. And frankly, it makes it harder for everyone else to figure out U.S. intentions.
And the last piece you mentioned, verifying the damage. We have satellite images showing surface damage at Fordo and elsewhere. But what about inside?
Right. That's the challenge of damage verification. Satellites can show us the surface impacts, craters, damaged buildings,
Yes.
but the internal effects on the equipment deep inside those hardened facilities, that remains really difficult to assess accurately, certainly in the immediate aftermath. And that uncertainty just adds another layer of complexity. It's hard to know the true strategic impact right away. So if we were to summarize the core takeaway from our dive today, it's that the aftermath of this U.S. strike has, well, very quickly escalated. It's become a multi-front confrontation. You've got Iran and Israel trading direct strikes. You have global powers pushing for calm. Key strategic choke points like Hormuz are suddenly at risk. And security alerts are up everywhere.
And that central uncertainty just hangs there, doesn't it? Whether this keeps spiraling into a bigger war, or if maybe, just maybe, it could push towards some kind of negotiation. It seems to really depend on what Iran does next, and how much sustained pressure comes from international diplomacy. You know, thinking about those immediate economic ripples we saw, the oil prices, the shipping rerouting, it makes you wonder, what do these events really tell us about just how vulnerable our global supply chains and energy security actually are? And how might countries start to rethink their reliance on these specific routes, these specific resources in the long run?
That's a really critical question to think about, and it underlines why it's so vital we all keep exploring these complex dynamics as they continue to evolve.